Hello, I'm John McAllister with the John McAllister Sports Report. Today, my guest is the assistant coach, the defensive coordinator at University of Toledo, Vince Kehres. Vince and I have been friends for quite a few years, and most recently, like the last three. I really like him. He's very intelligent, he's articulate, and he's a very sound football coach. And so I asked him if he would talk about the University of Toledo's football camp and camps. Gladly said yes. And I'd like to talk about those camps later and also just some other ideas on attending football camps. It's a big and bigger thing, like everything else, and it's hopefully more as much teaching goes on as recruiting and very important. And most of them are 1 day camps. I remember when they had 3 day, 4 day camps, and you stayed all night for 3 days. You got homesick on the first day or that morning, and that was it. But we've since changed it so much, and I think it's really, really good that people have. And if you'll sit back and enjoy the words of wisdom from the defensive coordinator at University of Toledo, Vince Kehres. And like I said earlier in my intro, my guest today is Vince Kehres, defensive coordinator at University of Toledo. And then maybe someday we'll talk defense. I wanted to talk to you today about was your football camps. Obviously, it's football camps have grown and grown all over. Yours has always been big. I remember a few years ago, you weren't there then. I think Coach Campbell was there, but you had offensive line, defensive line up on some yards in front of your buildings and stuff. They were all over the place, and it's because of numbers. And
Yeah,
okay, let's talk about you. First of all, Coach, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Coach. I'm doing real good.
What's the rumor about your oldest son right now? He's
Well,
huge.
yeah, he's my middle son, Bo. He's in the
Oh, is it
class of
middle son? Okay.
2028. Yeah, middle son. Yeah, my middle son, Bo's in the class of 2028. He's going to Toledo Central Catholic High School. He's in a great program under Coach Dempsey, and
Uh,
he's been blessed with some good measurables. So
I
right
that's
now he's
what I
passing
was
the eye test.
that's what I was joking with you about. I talked to Greg's a good friend of mine and mentioned him the other day, and his measurables are pretty good right
They're
now.
they're pretty good, considering his age and where he's at in his career. He's passing the eye test for a young guy right now.
That's for sure. That's for sure. Well, Vince, let's talk about your football camps at University of Toledo. Okay, what what are your goals, or what do you try to do with your camps?
Yeah, well, I think the starting point for football camp is for young guys to come and get the opportunity to get better at football. So we want the starting point for our camp to be teaching. And so every guy that comes to camp, when he leaves camp, he's made himself a better football player. He's able to take away some aspect of the camp that he can come home. And football is a sport you got to work on your own sometimes. You're in a team setting quite often, but you got to own your development. And if every guy can walk away with, man, here's something that I can go and do on my own that can make me a better football player, maybe a better at the position that I'm playing. That would be our goal, from this coaching staff here at the University of Toledo.
Well, then the second goal that you're going to hear is recruiting and showcasing. And obviously, that's true as well. Okay. I mean, it's all part of I think some colleges do more recruiting than teaching, as I've been around a long, long time with camps. But I think you guys do such a good job with the instruction. And I think the nice thing is you break them down into groups that are I don't know if the word's compatible, but they're same size, same
Yeah.
levels, and things like that. And I think that's really huge.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that Coach Cando and I kind of came from the same place at Mount Union, and we came up as young coaches running a lot of football camps. More at a time where lots of high school kids would go to camp for 2-3 days and spend the night in a dorm, and
Oh man.
go 2-3-4 times a day, and you're
Oh
you're
my.
really you're really trying to teach the fundamentals of football. So we want to keep that intact, even in a shorter version of camp that only lasts a few hours. But that goal of helping every young guy that loves football try to get a little bit better at football. That's definitely our aim here at Toledo.
For sure. You mentioned Mount Union. Tell me the advantages of a smaller. I mean, these Division two. I know Mount's three, but I mean Division two and three camps. Uh, what's the benefit out of that? Now, if you go out and look for autographs and uh, superstars and stuff, you're probably not going to find them there. But what's the advantage of going to a smaller camp?
Well, I think the advantage is, the numbers are smaller, so you're going to get more attention from the coaching staff that's working the camps, and you're going to get to rep the drills more times.
Right, for
So
sure.
it's gonna increase, how much better you're getting at football because of the amount of repetitions and eyes on you, versus a bigger camp where there are larger numbers and the lines are longer to perform the skill, the drill, whatever it is. And you don't get as many reps. And certainly, there's a recruiting is a huge part of these camps. And you
Right,
get to a bigger school, they certainly have circled the guys that they're evaluating, that they're focusing on. And
right.
I don't want to say the that other guys get stuck standing on the sidelines the whole time, but you're certainly just going to get more attention at a camp with fewer numbers.
Well, I think that, and I'm not putting down mega camps at all. There seem to be more and more mega camps, but my goodness, the numbers. I had a guy text me the other day and said he's sending his son to a mega camp because he'll get more exposure and go against better competition. Well, that's not quite true. I mean, he might theoretically, but reality, he probably not. I mean, there are guys that go to, and I'm not putting them down, mega camps, but they'll get 3 reps to
Yeah,
catch 4 passes in
I
3 hours. And
I
anyway,
think I think every young guy, that's coming up through, that should be a conversation with his high school football coach.
right,
Coach, what do you recommend for me in terms
right,
of camps? Where am I at right now? And what's most beneficial to me in terms of attending camps. But gosh, you see some kids that, their schedule is, they're almost going to camps every day the whole month of June. I don't think that's the right approach either.
for silly, but a few years ago, like I said, I've been to many of them. A parent was telling me, well, I think his name was Joey. He said, my son's arm's kind of sore. I hope he can perform well today. And he told me the string of camps, and I said, well, it's your guy's fault. His arm's sore. I said, the college coaches don't know, and furthermore, don't care. They just want to see the product,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I get it, but high school coaches, the problem is, I think I'm on a different tangent. They don't always have the say. It's the
Yeah.
parents and seeking the glory. I think, Coach.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Well,
think
let's.
in a perfect world, the parents are, are consulting with the high school coach, and the high school coach is going to have a pretty good idea where the guy's talent level is and what the best approach would be to take to camps. But yeah.
Now you being realistic. Now you know this. Be, high school coaches are losing and losing communication on those things.
Yeah.
Maybe not actual coaching and things, but well, the recruiting, let's say, it's getting worse and worse. But
Yeah.
okay, let me flip on here your schedule. I want to again. Okay, there are coaches. There are your schedules. Just run it through me, and I'm going to leave this on for a while. So tell me about how many do you think you'll have in Friday night, June 6th?
Yeah, that's typically, our biggest camp.
Right,
We call Friday Night Lights that we have
right,
June 6th and June 20th. Those are all position camps. So we'd have all the positions represented. We'll use three different fields for venues to split the guys up so that we have lots of space. I would expect, based on what we've had in the past, we'll probably be around 300 to 350 players at that first Friday Night Lights camp. And
right,
it may go down a little bit, but we'd probably still be 200 to 250 at the second Friday Night Lights camp. But we're like, for example, at my position at linebackers, if I have 30 linebackers, I'm going to have at least three linebackers coaches, and I'm going to split the guys up into
right,
groups of 10, kind of based on their age and size and those sort of
right,
things. And allow all three of those groups to be doing a drill at the same time. So
right.
everybody's getting a lot of reps at the drill, and it's not just me with 30 linebackers trying to run one drill.
Right. And those other coaches, I don't think they're high school coaches, are they? Don't you have college, small schools come in and help too, and your
Yeah, yeah, there's a
people and your
lot of.
UGAs and all those and are helping
Absolutely,
as
and
well.
we're able to use our players as well.
Right,
So veteran players that they got a pretty good idea what drills that we're working on with our guys.
right,
So
for sure,
I think a veteran player can run a drill. Certainly, a graduate assistant can run a drill. A support staff member could run a drill. And then you have some guys come into they're evaluating, but they don't mind running a drill too at the position that they're looking to evaluate.
for sure. Let's mention, and I like it, the 7-on-7 camps, but I think it's really important that you have O-line, D-line camps there too, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And those camps, the 7-on-7 component of it, those are teams. So
Right, right,
a high school coach is bringing, some of them have two groups of guys. They'll have an A and a B,
right.
but that way everybody get a lot of reps. But gosh, we have a lot of teams here for those two 7-on-7 camps. Unfortunately, we have lots of fields, and I think
Right.
we can get up around 30 teams, and make sure that, everybody gets to play 4 or 5 games before we even get into having a little tournament. So,
Yeah,
you know,
that's
th
really
those
good.
are those are good, from the standpoint of, I get to work with my quarterback. I'm working with, our own, my teammates, and,
Right,
my coaches running our offense and our defense, and,
right,
getting valuable reps on that. And then at the same time that that's going on, our staff runs the O-line, D-line camp.
right.
For example, for me, I coach the linebackers, and where am I at during that? Well, I like to go and work with the defensive line, and
Yeah,
get my roll up my sleeves, and get into the drills, and help there, and it allows me to see those guys at camp and evaluate them a little bit too. But a lot of the high school teams, when they come to that, they'll bring their linemen too. So,
right.
it's really a team function, and the linemen go to the lineman camp, and the 7-on-7 guys do the 7-on-7 tournament.
And just the opposite of what we talked about early with 300, 350, you don't have nearly the number. Well, you do, but you get so much more individual attention in the big man camps.
Oh,
I think, without a doubt. But
there's, through my 5 years of being here so far, there's been a lot of young men that, they'll come to both camps,
right,
and they'll come multiple years
right,
in a row,
right,
because they know they're getting a lot of development, at those big man camps. That's usually maybe 100 guys, so
uh,
somewhere in that neighborhood.
yeah, but yeah, much easier to deal with, I think. And I think complimenting you and that all the camps are probably the same, but yours, number one, you have a tremendous amount of field space in the
Hmm.
7-on-7s. I mean, you gotta walk her up on the. You gotta save yourself crossing the highway, but you're 77 years old. You gotta be a little slower, or
Yeah, we have
76.
a huge grass space that we
Right,
use during camp to get onto
right,
the grass, and that, in 7-on-7, that can break down into about 8 different fields.
right,
Then we'll use our stadium, obviously, and have a couple games going on here. We have a soccer field that can easily be,
right,
be made into a couple 7-on-7 fields. So we have a lot of space. We always run the lineman camp in the indoor facility, so
right,
that gives
right.
us a lot of space to work with those guys in there as well.
Privacy I mean, privacy to an extent and a lot of space, a lot of
Yeah.
teaching going on.
Yes, absolutely.
Coach, that's really good. We spent 10 minutes or so, more than that, promoting your camps. And I think it's huge. And always mentally, it seems like a kickoff camp that first week. And
Yeah,
you,
yeah.
you
I think
hug us.
it's kind of always been that way.
Right,
That usually that Friday night is the first Friday night in June. It's been even in late May, just the way the recruiting calendar played out this year. We had to push it back to June because of Memorial Day weekend, I believe. But
right,
it's usually right at the beginning of camp season, and
right.
it's a time where lots of guys want to get to camp. It's an evening camp, so they've already had, if their high school coach had stuff that day, it's not going to conflict with that. And,
Uh,
it's always had a great reputation, I think, of being a really good teaching camp. And, that reputation is spread throughout the state. And I think a lot of high school coaches like to direct their young guys up to our camp because they know that.
good selling. Okay, let's switch completely here. Okay, Vince, let's sell. I've got about 5 minutes. What's the importance? What advice would you give to a boy? Let's go a college potential guy, anybody, but a college level guy, whether it be Division One, two, or three. Well, tell them, how do they approach the camp, or what advice could you give to them?
Yeah, well, I think most all camps are going to start off with let's get the measurables, and let's do a couple quick measurements that would give us an indication of maybe the power and speed that this young guy can generate, the change
Right,
of direction. So I think as a young guy prepares for camp season, there's some standard drills: 5, 10, 5, broad
right.
jump, vertical jump, a 3 cone drill, that a young guy wants to practice. He wants to practice those drills
Thank
before he
you.
gets to camp, because and
Thank you.
now he's being evaluated. So you don't want that to be the first time you've ever tried the drill, is when you
All
get
right,
to camp.
thanks. That's so huge. Okay. And then with that, finish the drill.
Oh,
Finish,
absolutely. Absolutely.
finish the 5, 10, 5.
Absolutely.
Touch the line because
That that's as important as your time.
I tell kids all the time, especially in a camp like yours, somebody's always watching you.
Mhm.
Somebody is. I
Mhm.
am, I know. And I
Yep.
don't necessarily watch the actual, I want to watch how they react and everything.
Yep.
Okay. And so you're saying, let's talk about compete. I don't like the drill, but the O line, D line one-on-ones, I
Mhm.
don't like it because the defensive guy should win every time,
Yep.
but I do get things out of it. Well, tell me about competing in that drill because I think that's huge, Vince.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think, like, no matter what happens on the rep, I want to see the defensive lineman sprint back to
Fantastic.
his side, where
Thank
the
you.
D line's standing. That's really critical. I think you're really evaluating an offensive lineman on, his ability to get in a stance and bend and move his feet a little bit.
Yeah, right.
I completely agree that the advantage goes to the defense. Typically, there's no pads on, or maybe like, each guy's got a helmet on, but
Yeah,
it's not real football. But you wanna see the guy compete in the first few steps of that. What does that look like on both
right.
sides? And I think
That's really
guys
good.
evaluating get a lot out of that.
That's really good. Okay, we talked about finishing, and here's the other one. A couple more things, and here's another point that I like to have you comment on because you do learn. You do learn. I think players are guilty of looking around. I think players are guilty of trying. Their parents are trying to talk to them during camp. How do you approach the importance of teaching and learning? What do you do, coach, to help that?
Well, I think there's lots of value in I'm watching someone else take a rep and I'm
Right,
listening intently to what's being said, because
right,
there's probably something being said, every rep. What are the coaching points? What by the time I get up to the line and it's my turn, it says a lot about a young guy if he's been watching carefully, and he knows exactly what the drill is. Not to say he's going to do it perfectly and there's not going to be some coaching points, but if we've been doing the drill already for a little bit and then you get up there and you're unsure what you're doing, man, what are you doing? What are you doing in the back of the line there? Are you not paying attention? So,
right,
I think that's critically important, because in football, you can only get so many reps at everything. You got to get mental reps. You got
right.
to be able to watch and listen, and now apply it to it's your time to get a rep. And if somebody else just made a mistake, but you were listening and paying attention, you got that coaching point. You're going out there to try to, not make that same mistake.
Okay, my last comment on this, I really think you have to excuse me, I have one more before that. I think it's important for a player, a prospect to wear either a school identity part of his shorts, or I guess they can't, you all wear the same t-shirts, but the maybe different something that identifies him. Because I come to your camps, a lot of his camps, they'll say, "Well, look at the guy; he's got red shorts on from
Yeah.
Arcadia," and I
Yeah.
think sometimes it's important to show their colors somehow, school color and stuff.
Yeah. I would 100% agree with that. Yeah.
Uh, uh, is talk about competing. Tell me about that at a camp. What's the what's the general rule for you, coach? Now I know you coach linebackers, and they have to be. Everybody has to be aggressive, but what I call it competitive maturity. Where does that take place in this camp?
Yeah, I think you're always trying to teach guys how to practice. And I would attribute to this. When I went to football camp for the first time, I was probably 8 years old. It was Jack Lambert football camp. There's everybody there from 8-year-olds to 18-year-olds, because that's how camps were at that time. And Jack
Right,
Lambert got up there on the first day of camp, and his message to the campers was act like a man and be treated like a man. Well, in college football now, I kind of mirror that to act like a pro and be treated like a pro. Well, pros
uh,
know how to practice.
right,
Pros know how to practice. They know that they need to get the work that they need without putting other guys at risk of injury.
right,
And I think that's what we're trying to teach young guys at camp. Hey, we want to get the work that we need, but we don't want the last thing we want is somebody to get injured. So there is a real balance there between being
right,
competitive and being smart, and being a good teammate. We know you were in position there as a linebacker or a defensive back to make that play on the ball, but the receiver jumped up to catch it. There's no reason to take his legs out right there.
right,
Like we
for
got to
sure.
practice. We got to practice like pros, and that the ultimate goal of a camp is for everybody to get a little bit better and to leave healthy.
And to learn. And
Correct.
the last thing, and we're done here in a minute, but is build relationships, not only with coaches, but with players and stuff like that. Build a relation so they know each other and things like that. I think that's a benefit of camps.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's such a connected world now with social media and,
Yeah.
and that, I think if you go to camp and, you are able to, as a young guy to, meet, two or three coaches, that you shared information with and you started to build a little relationship with. And then, at the same time, you met a few guys from other schools and,
Yeah.
you can stay connected with them. You're all going through the same process here. And, you want to be a college football player and, be able to share information and, and experiences. I think that's really beneficial.
Coach, I really appreciate you taking the time, Vince. I think this has been really informative, and I think we need more information out about camps. I mean, more general information
Yeah.
besides promoting them. Again, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, John. Appreciate you.